Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry for our publications like manufacturing.net and Industrial Equipment News. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can get a notification whenever we go live, even when it's at different times, like on a Wednesday. But, sorry, we're not going live today because it was kind of last minute. So you're going to get this one when everyone else gets it. Jeff, how are you doing this week?
Good, David.
Yeah?
Feeling good. Wrapping it up for the year.
Wrapping it up for the year. Still coming off of that high from the episode 200. You know, I was real jazzed after that one, Jeff.
Were you?
Real jazzed.
Jazzed?
Honestly, I was, yeah. I had like podcast high coming off that one. I was just like, we did it! And I came home and like they were asking how I was. I was like, recorded episode 200, no bigs, whatever, 4 years, it's cool. And
do the boys actually get excited that you're like on a video or anything like that, or are they over it now?
I mean, they never get more excited other than seeing and just saying like, hey, there's daddy.
At least you get that. Wait till they're teenagers and they're like, it's so lame, who cares?
Yeah. What's going to be crazy is that I'm still going to be doing this when they're teenagers and playing with their Magnetiles that they've moved on from. Because those things are magical. Anna, how you doing this week?
Doing great. Also jazzed, not as much as you, I don't think, but like medium jazzed.
A medium jazz? You didn't hit that second pot of coffee because that one will get you jazzed. It's coming at you.
All right.
The afternoon pot of coffee. Also, a programming note that because of the holiday, this will be our last episode of the year. And then when we come back, we will be recording live on January 6th and sending it out to everybody in our newsletters and on our sites on January 7th. So good to see you. See you soon. Be safe. Right? Goes without saying.
Yeah, be safe.
Don't wrap it up yet. We got a lot to do.
Wear your seat.
Oh, yeah.
Wear your seatbelt.
We got to do the stories now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Before we do that, we have a word from our new sponsor, Stay Sharp with Razor Leaf.
Digital transformation is reshaping manufacturing, and leaders must keep up with a rapidly changing technology landscape. Razorleaf, a global consulting and systems integration firm, launched Stay Sharp with Razorleaf, a podcast covering digital thread, digital twins, PLM, MES, data integration, and more. Whether you're a seasoned professional or new to digital transformation, this podcast will help you stay ahead of the trends. You can find Stay Sharp with Razorleaf on all major podcast platforms. Tune in today.
And we're back. This week's episode is brought to you by fellow podcaster Stay Sharp with Razorleaf, the ultimate podcast for all things digital in the manufacturing industry. Each episode takes a deep dive into the multifaceted world of digital transformation, exploring topics such as the digital thread, digital twins, IDEs, model-based strategies, and delving into frontiers, cutting-edge technologies like PLM, MES, integration, and more. Check out Stay Sharp with Razorleaf today. Our first story this week. Stellantis fined after fatal assembly line accident. OSHA recently wrapped up an inspection into a fatal accident at the Stellantis Jeep Toledo Assembly Complex in Ohio. In August, 53-year-old Antonio Gaston died on the Jeep Gladiator line. He was tightening undercarriage bolts when he became trapped beneath a vehicle on the assembly line. OSHA cited the automaker for a serious violation as well as $16,101 in fines. According to the Toledo Blade, Stellantis didn't provide machine guarding on the inverted IPF chassis delivery conveyor, which left employees exposed to pinch point hazards. The Blade quoted a Stellantis media representative who said the company has, quote, robust safety measures in place for all its sites and will cooperate with OSHA to resolve the case. The last fatal accident at the complex took place in 2007 when a worker suffered a fall in the battery charging area. Jeff, are you surprised that something as common sense as machine guarding was missed by a major automaker?
Well, I think there's a lot of different things a lot of ways to respond to that, because it wasn't necessarily missed by the automaker. Granted, they own the facility, they employ the workers, all of that. But seems like it's one of those situations where as things evolved on the plant floor in terms of what was being made, how quickly it was running, all of those types of different facets of the operation, something was obviously missed. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was a deliberate. I think it was just we didn't look into that as things changed type of situation, which doesn't make it okay, doesn't excuse it. But I think when we look at these situations, it's hard because, number one, I'm glad we continue to report on them because there's always good takeaways from it. You want to have respect for the fatality that took place here without dismissing that or looking past it. But the bigger takeaway for our industry, the reality is learning from it. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest part of this story for me is Stellantis needs to, and this facility in particular, needs to look at this and understand we can't shy away from this. We can't try to just dismiss it and move on. We can't say it was a one-off or anything like that, but really look and dive into this so that this doesn't become a chain of events. In all of these, not all, in the vast majority of these situations where we look at these horrible incidents that happen on the plant floor, it's not the first one. And it leads to another thing and it leads to another thing and things get progressively worse. And then you've got OSHA basically camping out at these facilities and they're racking up, 6-7 figures in fines. Yeah. Get in there, figure it out, solve it now, show your workforce that obviously it's not just about this one incident, but workforce safety as a whole, no matter where you are or what you're doing in any particular operation or any facet of the operation, and do it right away. And they issued a response, but it was sort of a standard PR response. Yeah. Let your actions really lead the way here in terms of how you're going to address this and move forward. So it's a one-off and it stays that way. And I don't mean to degrade or downplay what happened when I say it that way, but
I mean, it's part of the issue that with new technologies and new implementations into the line, workers think they are inherently safer. Like new technology means safer technology. Do you think maybe sometimes that's how they get missed?
I think in this situation, looking at this individual's experience, this is the second different Stellantis plant he had worked in. He had been an auto worker for quite some time, decades. Yeah. At this point, I think it's just one of those situations where it's like, I know what I'm doing. Let me get in there and to knock this out and take care of it. Mm-hmm. I think it came from a place of just wanting to do your job and doing as quickly and as efficiently as possible. That's why it's so important to slow down and make sure you are doing it in the safest possible way because things are changing, things are moving faster. What was there last week may not be there today, or it may be there someplace differently that you need to account for and we're thinking about. So some of that is on your individual responsibility as a worker, but also everyone else who's there, right? I mean, we've talked about this to death. Safety is a culture thing. It's a team thing. Everybody plays a role.
Well, and Anna, Jeff made the point about how we continue to report on incidents like this because it's important to get the word out there. And I think part of that is that when you look at a fine like $16,101 for Stellantis is nothing. Whereas when you report on it, when local media reports on it, when national media, when trade media reports on it, I think that's where you can really make some change for the automaker because that stain is so much greater than any penalty that OSHA is levying.
I agree. And I think Jeff was on the right track here talking about the role that these types of situations play in the overall culture of a plant or a company. To me, that was the biggest issue here, too. I mean, you look at what happened here. Antonio Gaston, father of 4, he worked in Belvedere and transferred over in, I think, 2021 or 22. And according to a friend quoted in a report, he left his family back in Illinois to come and work. They've been visiting back and forth. I mean, obviously someone who's just doing everything that they can for their family, and just heartbreaking to think that somebody could go to work and die. I mean, that's, you can't defend that. That said, you look at Toledo. This is a big place. It's got a lot of employees, something like 6,000 plus at this time. Millions of Jeeps have been produced here. They put a lot of money into it over the years, retooled it a lot. And we heard in November from Stellantis that they would be taking that plant, the Gladiator line, and taking it from 2 shifts to 1. So their plan is to lay off 1,100 union workers effective January 5th. That's coming up pretty soon, right? Yeah. That's the same line that this person was on when this took place. assuming that there were plenty of employees within earshot, eyeshot, whatever, of this very traumatic incident that took place with their colleague. Now there's going to be thousands of job cuts at that plant. We know from our coverage of Stellantis that there's been a lot of issues with Stellantis profitability. There's now been a lot of change in management. There's been some issues that the dealers were striking back against some of the leadership capabilities, stock issues, all kinds of stuff that if you're a rank and file manufacturing worker, you might look at this and say, like, this sucks.
Yeah.
What am I doing here? And that's a big problem. One of the priorities that Stellantis chairman John Elkann has taken on in the wake of Carlos Tavares' departure as CEO, and John Elkann is the chairman. He's serving as interim CEO for now. One of the things that was reported was a priority for him was repair the relationship with the workers. The narrative, I think, there was that there was a big disconnect, that Tavares, he went after the union. There was clearly some strain there between leadership and the union. Maybe this fresh page will be a good way to kind of hit the reset button and start over. And I'm not saying that, this was Carlos Tavares' fault by any means, that, the correct safeguards were neglected here in this specific plant. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that if you have a top-down driven culture of finger pointing and resentment, that it bleeds into every aspect of the business. And does a bad culture make a manufacturing plant less safe? Absolutely, it does. Yeah. Absolutely, it does. Because you lose leadership, you lose buy-in in programs. People say, forget it, I don't care about this new initiative or whatever. Nobody cares about us. I don't understand what's happening here, and people get down on the process, and things get missed. No one means to do it, but that's what happens. And so I think that that Stellantis does need like a new day. Whatever was going on there was not working, and I
turn the page.
They got to turn the page.
Yeah. No, I think that is one thing that any employee in any industry over a long period of time understands unequivocally, is how important leadership is to the success of any business, right? Because it is just any worker, rank and file, looks to the top, sees how this individual holds themselves and runs the business, his or herself, and runs the business, and kind of take their lead from there. Don Erickson on YouTube commented, "This is why OSHA is irrelevant. $16,101. It's like fining me 4 peanuts for driving 100 miles per hour and killing a kid. So stupid. If the fine was 16 million, this guy would be alive today." And while that is a bit hyperbole, I have to agree with Don. We talk a lot about OSHA having a little bit more teeth, and you feel like if there are heavier fines that maybe sometimes these things wouldn't happen. I don't know. Is that out of line to say, Jeff?
I don't think so. And I think that goes back to, I think we had this conversation more than once, is scaling those fines based on the size of the company. So it does have a greater impact. 16 grand to someplace that employs 20 people, that's a huge fine. 16 grand, to the reader's point there, for Stellantis, that doesn't mean anything. No. Especially when they're going to appeal and probably get it knocked down a little bit more. And to the point again, where it's more, the reporting in the headlines are the bigger hit than any type of fine there. But you could make that fine more prominent so those headlines are even bigger. Yeah. That's 160 grand. That stands out a little bit more too. Yeah. So I would agree with him on that extent.
Yeah, Anna, it's easy to understand Don's frustration with the situation because, we've seen it time and again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I agree. I think you made the right point. The headline is the biggest penalty here, really.
Yeah. All right, our next biggest story for the week of December, where are we? 18th. What day and time is it? You can tell we're getting close to the holidays because time is just kind of relative,
Is that jazzy feeling? Are you like tingling in the top of your head or something?
There's a tingling.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a tingling.
When do we see jazz hands?
I feel like I've tried to go out of my way to not talk with my hands as much as I typically do because I'd be swatting this thing. I'd kind of be getting Jeff from a distance here. I'd get out of frame. Eric gets upset because there are no hands. But, by the fifth story, We'll get jazzy. We'll get jazzy.
We'll get jazzy.
We'll break into our dance number that we've been working on for the last year.
Yes, let's have a flash mob.
It's time. Yeah, flash mob on the podcast.
I'm glad I was left out of this.
All right, our next most popular story. Tongue implants could treat sleep apnea without a CPAP. Medical technology company Nyxoah has officially launched the Genio system. Genio is a small implant to treat obstructive sleep apnea without a CPAP. The device is inserted through an incision under the chin and controlled by a wearable. The system includes a neurostimulator, an activation chip, a charger, and adhesive patches. It's designed to deliver bilateral stimulation to the hypoglossal nerve, which controls the muscles in the tongue. To use it, you place this external activation chip under your chin before going to sleep. While you're sleeping, the device makes your tongue move forward so it doesn't fall back and block your airway. The product's commercial launch in England lines up with the first successful implants performed at the University College London hospitals. While it has been available in the EU since 2019, it's still only an investigational device in the United States. Jeff, it looks like big things are on the horizon for Nyxoah, especially when the U.S. market opens up, because anytime we talk CPAP devices, it's extremely popular.
First of all, good work on the company name. That was not an easy one. I was not sure how to say that one.
No, I looked up a couple of different reports that the CEO has done. And that was one of my takeaways, too, is that when it comes to medical, you know, I always like to give manufacturers and product designers a hard time when their products are like GX94-13 Alpha. And, you know, but man, if one thing, healthcare is good for one thing, it is the odd name.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like you said, good stuff on the horizon for this company, for Nyxoah. Mm-hmm. First of all, one of the things that kind of threw me, and maybe this stat's a little bit dated, but according to the American Medical Association, they say there's about 30 million Americans that suffer from sleep apnea. Oof. But like what's more scary is 80% of those cases go undiagnosed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's terrifying. That just blew me away. The fact that there's that many people out there that are dealing with something that's potentially life-threatening. It's terrifying. But the good stuff that's coming here, first of all, Nyxoah has gotten they've submitted the fourth and final module for their pre-market approval, which is what you need to go through for the FDA to get onto the U.S. market. That was submitted in this summer. It usually takes about 6 months, so January-ish, early next year, they should be getting that, which would free them up then to make this an FDA-approved device for the American marketplace. They also got an infusion of almost $30 million from a private investor. So they've got some coffers to work with, which they're going to need because they're going against some big players when you look at those CPAP machines. Yep. You're looking at Philips. You're looking at a company called ResMed, which is kind of, those two really have cornered the market when it comes to those two, that type of device, those CPAPs. So it'll be interesting once they start going head to head. Just by looking at it, you can appreciate using something that basically kind of looks like a bottle cap, like for like a 2-liter bottle that goes underneath your chin versus a mask.
Yeah.
I mean, those things can be very intrusive, obviously.
Yeah, versus like a alien face hugger.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Yeah.
So once I saw all those numbers, I mean, now it makes sense why this story got so much interest. I was a little bit surprised at first, but a lot of different things at play here, and this company seems to have really tapped into something. You know, this would not work for you, David, because it tapes onto the bottom of your chin. Yeah. It needs to adhere to the skin. So if you've got a beard,
just have like a little, what's that? That's my like CPAP patch. Like I gotta like mow a circle in there.
So there are a little, things like that. And it is like an inpatient procedure to have that embedded under your chin, but it doesn't seem overly intrusive otherwise for solving a huge, huge issue.
Well, and that's one thing I was curious about. Do you think people are getting more receptive to the idea of an implantable? Just because I know that at first it seems weird, just like, hey, we're going to implant this device to control your tongue while you sleep.
The way it's explained, though, it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it really
Very
does.
simplistic.
And it's like a rechargeable device. I mean, the thing that you put on every night is you recharge it in the morning, tape it back on, and it keeps your tongue from rolling back. So all that seems to resonate. I think people are getting, I mean, if it's affecting your sleep, that's the core element of just day-to-day life. Yeah. And if you're suffering that way, I think people are going to be very receptive to even that type of procedure and having something implanted in their jaw.
No, and I mean, you talk about the undiagnosed. Anytime it comes to sleep apnea, it's always top on my radar because, I mean, that was how my mother died.
Yeah.
She died from sleep apnea 11 years ago, 12 years ago, right when it started becoming a thing. Like, that was the first time sleep apnea got on my radar, my family's radar. And now, I mean, I joke about it anytime we have a story, but like, I mean, you should hang out at the cottage for a weekend when the family's there, and you can tell when everyone goes to sleep based on when their CPAP start firing up. Just like, hey, and you can tell whoever's last, because the person that's last, it's just like, hey, before you get into the sticks up north, stop at a store and get like 2 gallons of distilled water because you need it to run. But to that point, Anna, you know, these CPAP devices take a lot of maintenance, are very costly, and are really obstructive when it comes to sleeping. So when it comes to kind of maybe getting away from what you think of a traditional CPAP, you could see how people are excited just when they started to transition from the full face mask to the one that goes over the nose. That was huge. So making it even less obstructive is going to be a win.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course such an effective device in many ways, but at the same time feels a bit like a bridge solution because it is so bulky and cumbersome. And I think so many sleep apnea sufferers, of which there are many, as Jeff pointed out, they are failing to treat their condition even if it is diagnosed because they find that CPAP to be uncomfortable, or, you know, they take it off while they're asleep and they don't realize. And then, you know, I think that kind of stuff happens a lot. And so, you know, looking at in terms of advancing a new type of solution, the other thing that I thought of when I was reading this this article was it wasn't that long ago that we were discussing on the cast the recall and settlements involved in the Philips CPAP and BiPAP machines. As a reminder, they were implicated in the deaths of over 500 people because some type of foam that was used in the face mask was breaking down, and
Toxic.
It was toxic. Yeah. People were aspirating chemicals. I think people maybe were choking. People were having like heart episodes. I mean, it was just terrible, right? And so I wonder what that story did for the adoption of the CPAP in general. I mean, there's got to be people out there that are like, look, I'll take my chances. You know, I've made it this far. I'm not going to strap on this thing that could kill me tomorrow. You know? And so I think that maybe poisoned the view of that device for some people. I don't, you know, that's not been studied. So we have no idea, you know, the opportunity cost or whatever that came out of that particular case. But it was well publicized. And I know that it probably put some fear into some people. So the idea of finding a new way to approach this condition that, as you said, is very, very common. People might be ready for something new at this time.
Well, and to that point, when Jeff mentioned that, you know, Philips and ResMed are the major players in this, you don't know that because of how well they have been doing in the industry. You know Philips and ResMed because of all the headlines where they've had some issues lately. You know, in additional issues, operator error, their manufacturing errors, those recalls you're talking about, which are these like terrible stains on like truly life-saving devices. But it's also a reminder that we're still kind of figuring out this technology. And if you are one of those people on the bubble and your doctor told you to try it. Because the most important thing is that not just when you try it, it's not like an immediate impact sort of thing, right? Where it's kind of the long game where you got to have it for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, but then you start seeing like real benefits to your livelihood. I mean, even if you have slept next to somebody or slept in the same area as someone that has one of these things on, you understand that like, hey, this is still Jeff's thing leading to way more things, you know, like we're still figuring it out and there's still a lot of room to grow. So definitely appreciate the technology. And if your doctor has suggested a sleep study, just do it. Because if anything, you get a crazy rundown of how you sleep at night, and it is nowhere near what you expect in terms of episodes and stuff like that. I remain on the fence about getting one. No, all right. That's not true. I haven't taken a sleep study yet. Our next most popular story, even though I promised to do one, What really happened with Orion's heat shield during the 2022 Reentry incident? Our next most popular story. And there's a lot of meat on this bone, so stay with us for a second. A new article from Marcos Fernandez-Tous from the University of North Dakota discusses what went wrong as NASA's Orion capsule returned to Earth 2 years ago. The capsule was returning from the 25-day, 270,000-mile Artemis 1 mission that took it around and beyond the moon. When the USS Portland lifted Orion out of the ocean, shock waves rippled across the capsule's surface, and the crew saw big cracks on the capsule's lower surface, where the exterior bonds to the heat shield. So what happened? Well, some damage is expected. After all, this shield experiences temperatures around 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, as the craft slowed from 27,000 miles per hour to about 20 miles per hour upon reentry. Still, while Artemis 1 was uncrewed, NASA wants to send humans to the moon in 2026 and plans to use the same capsule to bring them back. Engineers are trying to find a way to prevent the same issues from happening again, and 2026 is closer than you think. Fernandez-Tous, the associate professor of space studies, that includes rocket propulsion and hypersonic aerodynamics at North Dakota. He goes into great detail as to just what happened and how. Now, the short version is that re-entering the Earth's atmosphere is a violent, carefully choreographed mission. He writes, quote, "No material on Earth can stand this hellish environment without being seriously damaged. But the heat shield is designed to take punishment. The shield is made of a material designed to evaporate and absorb the energy produced by the friction of the air against the vehicle. As Orion approached the upper layers of the atmosphere, the shield started melting and then produced these gases that may have escaped through the pores in the material. Then when the capsule gained altitude again, it kind of hits the atmosphere, bounces out, and then comes back down again. When the capsule gained altitude again, the outer layers of this resin froze, trapping the heat from the first dive inside. This heat vaporized the resin. When the capsule dipped into the atmosphere the second time, this gas expanded, became heated, and escaped, producing those cracks on the surface. NASA says Artemis 2 will have a modified reentry trajectory to prevent heat from accumulating. For Artemis 3, which is planned in 2027, NASA intends to use entirely new manufacturing methods to make the shield. So the outside of this capsule is still going to get very hot, and the heat shield should still evaporate, but the astronauts should be safe. Jeff, it's times like these that serve as like a great reminder that rocket science is hard.
Yes, it can be. Yes, there was a lot of technical details in there, and I kind of took a little bit of. I didn't really care for one of the comments on our site because the individual was very, very critical of why are we using essentially the same manufacturing we used to send people to space in the 60s as now. And what I would compare it to, it's kind of like the same evolution we've seen with, I don't know, the tires on your car.
Yeah.
From the time there has been tires on a car, they've been round and they've been rubber.
Yeah.
But we've made changes to them. We've enhanced them so they don't puncture as easily. So they adjust to temperature fluctuations. There's a lot of engineering that goes into that round piece of rubber that's on your vehicle, but it's not made the same way. It's able to adapt more to its environment. And I think that's what we saw here, which is why it was an initial experiment. That's why it was a trial run here, so to speak. There wasn't anybody involved.
Yeah.
Because when you are dealing with those types of temperature swings, obviously that's going to have a different impact. You can't assess that in a lab.
Yeah.
There's no way you could have a comparable dynamic. So
yeah, you can't go from 27,000 miles per hour to 20.
You can't really simulate that. So, well, you can try.
Yeah,
but
I would watch that.
Absolutely. So I think what they've learned a lot here in terms of the re-entry angle, in terms of making the material more porous. So a lot of that gas, when it is freezing and heating up and everything else, it has a way to escape without cracking the material.
Yeah.
All of that makes sense. And I think it was interesting to have the author sort of go through it from his perspective and his background, because he is very knowledgeable on all of these things.
Yeah.
I think put it into context pretty cleanly.
Yeah.
What got me too thinking about, or as I was looking at this and trying to understand everything he was saying, is what an interesting time NASA is in right now with a lot of different changes, especially with the new administration coming in. Historically, President Trump had been very supportive of NASA. He increased their budget by about 10%. He's the guy who created Space Force, after all, jacked up their budget pretty significantly. So I think there's a lot of support there. But what's interesting is the individual who's going to be at the helm of NASA, which is Jared Isaacman. I don't know if you remember that name, but he is the one who's been on a couple different SpaceX walks. He's very close with Elon Musk. So how is he going to feel about developing these types of things internally versus working with somebody like a SpaceX or a private partner outside of the government? Now, these types of tests and these types of trials, if you want to look at it as a success or a failure, I guess that depends on your perspective. But you could definitely see a negative connotation coming out of this. And how is he going to feel? He's not a academic type. He's not a professor or anybody who's maybe historically been, he's not from the same pool that these administrators were typically taken from. He's more of a businessman. So how is he going to look at a lot of these developments too? There's a pretty strict timeline. We're going to the moon. We've heard Elon Musk talk about colonizing planets. It wasn't the moon that he was talking about. Oh, yeah. So where are the priorities going to be here for Artemis going forward? And does these types of situations have a negative impact on that going forward?
No, that was you look into what's going on in that industry right now, and Space.com reports about the Trump administration potentially gutting NASA and forcing it to contract much of the work out to private companies. And we're in a really interesting time with some very glaring potential conflicts of interest, I think, coming up. I think part of the reason that President Trump invested in space, in this new space race, is because it was this, it was ego driven, I think that's part of it, and I think also he comes from a generation where the space race was, the biggest thing that happened on Earth. So it's going to be this weird mix of like space race, legacy, and ego versus this new focus on government efficiency. And I'm kind of really interested to see how that blends.
Well, and Isaacman has tried to position himself as right down the middle and very neutral, but then he has these very strong allegiances to Elon Musk, who apparently is going to have a pretty big impact on this administration. So, yeah. So, Anna, with that influence Musk is going to have on this new administration, how quickly does he make it to being a trillionaire once he takes over all these NASA contracts?
A trillionaire. Boo.
We're going to just timestamp this, or, pull this one aside for 3 years from now when it's just like, it happened faster than we thought.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot. I think you're right. I think there's a lot that's up in the air right now with this. Elon Musk has talked about colonizing Mars, yes, but he's also talked a lot about cutting government spending. And for this being sort of a pet project for Trump, it'll be interesting to see how that works, because we know that there's really not a ton of discretionary spending available from which to cut $2 trillion before you start having to get into things like, Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. So this would be ripe for the picking, I would think.
Yeah.
But as considered maybe non-essential spending. I don't know. We'll see. But I do think that there's also the secondary component of just how ambitious these goals are and how, in my opinion, unlikely they are to be realized during the next Trump administration. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson said at one point in time, the Artemis campaign is the most daring, technically challenging, collaborative international endeavor humanity has ever set out to do.
Yeah. So he undersold it.
Yeah. That's incredible, right? Like, that is no joke. And if you look at the timelines, you mentioned 2026, 2027. I think when you look at a story like this about the heat shield, it really kind of illustrates how much there is to do. I hate, that's a very simple way of putting it, but you consider how much technological progress that we have made in the last several decades, but there's still these very niche, dedicated, but very important areas where we're still using old manufacturing processes, where we're still using old technology, because to build the thing new with everything that we have is going to take more than a couple years and a couple $1 million. It's going to take a long, long time to make that happen. And for timelines that felt like they were a little bit arbitrary when they were set, I'm not a fan of, and I don't think anyone is, of the federal government coming in with these ambitious moonshot projects and saying, like, this is when we're going to have it done, get it done by then. That doesn't make sense. I mean, this is science. This is like so much dev time to make this work on a compressed timeline is really asking for problems with equipment, compromising safety, things like that. So yeah, will this happen at all? I don't know. It's really hard to say at this point because of all these other complexities that are coming with the new change in administration. I think that kind of adds a wrinkle into the potential for this to maybe get, stymied in some way.
Well, and Jeff asked the question, was this a success or not? How you view it? I do view it as a success. The one that kind of threw me was what they're going to do with Artemis 2. Artemis 2, they're just modifying the reentry trajectory to prevent heat from accumulating. And to me, I was just like, all right, that's a stopgap. Maybe you could change the plans for Artemis 2. Artemis 3 seems a little bit more, they're going to change how they manufacture it to make it a little bit more sound. I feel like maybe there could be more of a bridge in Artemis 2 rather than just like, what if we just change the angle? It should be fine.
They went a little bit more in depth.
No, I know. I understand that. No, I understand that the professor was making it so people like us could read it and be like, oh, all right. Seems fine. Seems like they got it.
They got it.
They got it. Yeah.
They got it.
All right. Our next most popular story this week. Anduril and Archer to make new military aircraft for critical defense applications. Anduril, a new player in defense contracts, and U.S.-based eVTOL startup Archer Aviation this week announced a new partnership to jointly develop a hybrid VTOL aircraft for critical defense applications. The companies plan to target a potential DoD program of record, which are programs that Congress not only intends to fund, but has appropriated funding for them. The partners hope to bring together Anduril's expertise in AI and systems integration and Archer's ability to rapidly develop advanced VTOL aircraft using existing commercial parts and supply chains. The combined effort could accelerate time to market at a fraction of the cost of traditional alternatives. The new military aircraft could be based on Archer's Midnight eVTOL aircraft, which recently completed a transition flight while flying at more than 100 miles per hour. The company believes that the craft, weighing about 6,500 pounds, is one of the largest eVTOL aircraft to complete a transition. And just a reminder that a transition flight occurs when an aircraft takes off vertically, like a helicopter, accelerates forward, and transitions from thrust-borne to wing-borne flight, like an airplane, with tilt propellers forward before decelerating and landing vertically. Jeff, the problems that we have seen with the Osprey have been plentiful. Is that where Anduril and Archer might see an opening?
I think it is, and I think they're being pushed there. And I think there's a lot of different factors at play here. So first of all, let's look at the concept that we were shown in the video that they produced there. Very small aircraft.
Yeah.
So when you talk about critical military applications, I'm trying to figure out what they're going to use this for.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the comparison in size between that versus the 26-ton Osprey, it's hard to draw a comparison. I don't know how you arm that. I don't know how you put it, how you transport troops in it. I'm not sure what the application is beyond that, which we already use drones for.
Yeah, so the Midnight is kind of where Archer is now, and that the technology developed for it would maybe, let's just say, supersized for defense applications. I don't think it would be the same footprint.
It couldn't be.
Yeah.
But that leads to other issues because the heaviest the largest electric aircraft that we've ever had was about 8,000 pounds.
Yeah.
That's a lot less than the Osprey. That's still, that's under development still. It can haul like 30 people. It's a commercial airliner from Hart Aerospace. That's the biggest we've got right now. And I still don't see that meeting that critical military application footprint.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where this is going to go. I think this does stem from the fact that the Osprey has had so many issues. We're looking at an aircraft that, for a number of reasons, people still love. The functionality of it. The problem with this too isn't the fact that it's not an electric aircraft. The problem is that it's hard to land. The actual functionality of tilting the wings from being a vertical takeoff and landing to a plane isn't the issue. Yeah. So I don't know how that's going to be different for this type of design, how they're going to fix that landing and takeoff, unless it's a lot smaller. If it's smaller and lighter, it can't do the things that we want it to do. So it just feels like there's this, it's sort of chasing its tail a little bit here. I don't know how this is going to come into play. I do think this stems from the fact that this is, let's remember, the Osprey is made by Bell Textron and Boeing. Mm-hmm. So if if I can put my tinfoil hat on here for a minute, is DoD really trying to send Boeing a message here like, you've got a lot of problems, okay? You're not doing a lot of things correctly for us. We've seen everything on the commercial side. The Osprey is still, there's been over 60 people who have lost their lives on an Osprey. So are they doing this to try to push that along, kind of kick Boeing in the butt a little bit to help them fix this problem? Is that part of the concept here? Because these two, when you look at Archer and Anduril, they're not close in my opinion. This is way, they have a ways to go here. So yeah, there's just a lot of interesting dynamics at play. And I think a lot of it does stem from issues over the Osprey.
No, that was a big part of the story for me. When I covered this story was they're just like, hey, we got something hot coming down the pike. It's going to be great. And I'm just like, oh, right. What is it? Not going to tell you. How's it going to work? Not going to tell you. Where are you going to make it? Not going to tell you. Any details whatsoever. Read the press release. There's nothing in the press release. Can you give me anything else? Nah. So I do think this was kind of hurry up and wait. We've got this partnership. We're both good at these two things. But I mean, a lot of people were making the point that Archer's Midnight still only has like 100-mile range. And one thing that's important is that, Anna, they did, it is reported that this is going to be a hybrid, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, right now, Archer's wheelhouse is electrics.
Yeah.
So, I mean, who knows where either of them are when it comes to hybrid technology?
Yeah, I agree with you both that I think that I wasn't quite there on it either. I feel like there is a long way between there and here. And as you said, this is a company that has, built its company around eVTOLs. It makes electric planes. And maybe it's easier to build a hybrid if you're coming from the electric side than if you're coming from the gasoline side. And so that's why they're trying to leave some of those more legacy companies behind and move in a different direction. That's certainly possible. I mean, Agility Prime has expressed interest in hybrid electrics. They are helping to fund and test a hybrid electric short takeoff and landing aircraft from Electra Aero right now. They do have a need for this, but as you said, the range limitations that exist right now on what Archer is basing this or jumping off of on this, which is that Midnight, 100 miles, that is not a military equipped model there.
Yeah.
And if you look at what Electra Aero has, they're predicting a maximum range of 1,100 nautical miles with reserves. That doesn't make sense, does it?
Okay. I mean,
that would be a huge leap.
Yeah, I mean,
sure. But I mean, that's with a hybrid aircraft, right? Or is that
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, who knows? But my point is that it does feel like a big swing in terms of what the military is looking for and what they have already ready to go.
Yeah.
It seems like it's going to be a long, long time before they're there. Right now, if you look at what Archer traditionally does, it's urban air mobility. And guess what? That's not proven either. So, there's, I think from a timeline and a cost perspective, we have no idea how to gauge success in terms of getting from here to there. I think it's a long ways off.
Well, and I think, Jeff talks about how this might be the government pushing Boeing and Bell Textron to kind of get to right their ship. But this also kind of speaks to just how we have these legacy contractors, right? And we think that there's no competing with them because they have completely cornered the market. But when we see the Andurils and Palantirs pop up, because there is just if you are a giant, there are a lot of scraps in between, that you can pick up and create a multi-billion-dollar business just taking little pieces from these giants. So it could also just be Anduril realizing the gap from zero to Boeing and Textron, there's a lot of room in there for a potential new player. And, and there's time, I think the nature of these, what is the DOD contract, the program of record, the nature of those is almost, it reminds me of DARPA, right? Yeah. Where a lot of it is investigative.
We're gonna do this.
Yeah. And so I don't know, you see what they're really good at, and you think that if they get a larger pile of money, maybe it could go somewhere. And honestly, and I read a lot about Agility Prime's investments in the area as well. And it's like any of that new technology that you see at DARPA, where it's like, okay, we see this, we know we got to do something about it. We just don't know what it is or how we're going to do it. And I feel like that's what we're doing here.
I thought it was interesting too. I saw Stellantis was among the investors as well.
Yeah.
They seem to be dipping their toe in all of this electric aviation stuff as well.
Yeah.
This isn't the first time we've seen their name pop up. So everybody's investigating the technology. So that was kind of interesting for me to see those folks get involved.
I mean, the money's there. So as part of this announcement, Archer launched a new program called Archer Defense, which is going to be supported in part by $430 million in additional equity capital that the company plans to use for Archer Defense, but as well as, quote, general corporate purposes. I was just, when I'm investing in something, if somebody told me they were going to take my money and use it for general purposes, I'm like, I'm going to need more than that.
Or they don't want to know, because another one was United. I thought that was interesting for them to invest in a military application.
Stellantis, United, and then the other institutional investors were Wellington Management and Abu Dhabi Investment Holding Company 2.0, which is an IHC subsidiary. Big players in there, a big pile of money. So, hey, they've got a good starting point. It'll be interesting to see what happens. All right. Our most popular story this week. The U.S.'s tallest skyscraper would be a hazard to air travel. No one saw that coming. What a giant pencil into the sky, and all of a sudden we got to fly around it. Earlier this year, Madison Capital partnered with architecture firm AO to build a 1,907-foot tower in Oklahoma City. Work was tentatively scheduled to begin this October, but it's now pushed back to 2025. The project is currently facing pushback from the FAA because the tower would be a, quote, hazard to air navigation. The agency says its determination will become final early next year unless a petition is filed. Oklahoma City Airport Director Jeff Mulder last month wrote a letter to the FAA saying the Boardwalk at Bricktown development poses risks to OKC Will Rogers International Airport, Wiley Post Airport, and Tinker Air Force Base. He said the tower could end up forcing pilots to spend more time circling before landing. Mulder said the tower could create, quote, adverse changes to standard departure procedures and flight safety issues that could impact air travel for everyone in the area. Developer Scott Madison said, quote, we're still going to have a build there no matter what. I like that response. Anna, isn't it worth being home to the, quote, Legends Tower, the tallest skyscraper in the United States, if all it means is that your airports have a slightly more complicated landing, or airplanes have a slightly more complicated landing? I mean, come on. We live in Madison. No one lands without circling at least 3 or 4 times. It's just normal. As you approach, you circle, and then you kind of, every time. It happens all the time. It's way more regular. I don't know. That was the one part that stood out to me is they're like, it's inherently dangerous to turn. Just like, I don't know. I feel like we do it all the time.
I am not on the same page as you are. This has annoyed me, this story. Like, I honestly, so it took me about 7 seconds to find the LinkedIn profile of Jeff Mulder, the OKC airport director. And he has been in this role since 2021. He's worked in the aviation industry as an executive for like 30 years. Mm-hmm. This isn't like the new guy coming in and switching gears on a project that's already been mapped out. This is someone who would be, in my opinion, key to the process.
Yeah.
And was maybe overlooked, which to me screams like promote ambitious project, generate public interest, and then strong arm regulators into getting on board with you and bending the rules. And I only say that because we live in a city that's growing more quickly than real estate can keep up. And we see this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Where developers come in and they've got all these promises around financial payback and these vast ambitions and, wanting to make a name for whatever it is that they're doing. But, oh, by the way, it's in violation of all these rules and we need dispensations in order to get it passed. Mm-hmm. I think that happens a lot.
Yeah.
It seems like maybe that's what happened here is that they had this very bold plan and didn't check all the boxes in terms of working through the due diligence that is required to work with all the local agencies and figure out, does this work or not? And so to be honest with you, I find it pretty unlikely at this point that this developer is going to get around the FAA.
Yeah.
And also, how do you maintain public support for a project like that when it's already been revealed publicly that it's going to be a huge pain for you to take the airport now?
Yeah. Because I think when you look at the numbers, the number of people that it will wow on the ground are a lot larger than the number of people it's going to disrupt in the air.
I don't know if I agree with that. I feel like we're going to see a shorter tower. Yeah. And if we do, then who cares? Because the only thing that was compelling about this project to begin with, and the reason it was going to bring all these people in, is because it was the tallest tower in the United States. And if it's just another medium-sized tower in a medium-sized town, it's not worth anything to anyone. I actually feel like this project is probably dead. That's just my perspective on it. But
okay. Well, Jeff, is the Legends Tower what is it at Bricktown?
The Broadway at Bricktown?
The Broadway at Bricktown. They shutting down the lights on Broadway?
I don't know. It's interesting because it's sort of competing strategies here to get people to Oklahoma City. You want this big tower to get them there. But if it's a pain to actually do that, people aren't going to come back and they're just going to complain about that. What's interesting, though, too, is the public sentiment is really not siding with the FAA or the airport. They still seem very excited about building this tower.
Yeah.
Found something on channel9news.com, which is out of Oklahoma City. They said the FAA received 22 letters in opposition and only 2 in support. The opposition included commercial airlines, student pilots, and quite honestly, this next one, you can laugh, but may have the biggest impact, SEC sports fans.
Oh.
All concerned about the impact on team flights. The FAA's letter also highlighted concerns that the tower could impede the growth of the University of Oklahoma's aviation program, which has received millions in FAA grants. Additionally, the FAA raised the issue of necessary changes at Tinker Air Force Base. That could be the one that really also has a lot of impact. So you're going to upset the military and you're going to upset sports fans, which you can laugh about the sports fans thing, but they spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay. If you look at the impact of folks from Tuscaloosa and Alabama, from Athens and Georgia, Texas teams as well coming up there, you don't want to alienate those folks if you want them to come to your town and spend money and go to your football games.
But we're not talking about alienating them. We're talking about their flight going from 54 minutes to 55 minutes because they got to turn around.
But if the FAA says that it could create a safety issue, like if I live in that town and you're telling me building this tower is going to create a potential safety issue for flights, no, I'm not interested.
Yeah. I mean, I get it, but that's like the inherent safety issue of it's safer to go straight in a car than it is to go straight and turn. It's just inherent. Like, I mean, it's like.
So what if it's inherent?
I understand that, but it's like, it's not like we're reinventing modern flying here. We're turning. Like,
but if it changes the data.
I understand that.
David,
but
they're talking about it being not an inconvenience to air navigation. It's a hazard. This is what the FAA does. And if they're determining that this is what it is, it's significant in my opinion. What's interesting to your point is the last comment here on the site is, despite the FAA's opposition, the project could still proceed without its approval as negotiations to mitigate the risks have been unsuccessful. So basically, you've got the airport and the FAA saying, don't do it. And everybody else going, meh.
We're going to do it.
Yeah.
A couple of comments that we got on YouTube for this one. Zed says, it's 7 miles away and not in line with the runway. I feel like someone at the FAA just doesn't want New York City to be outdone. I don't know if it's that. Bear Claw, however, says, I checked it out.
Bear Claw.
Bear Claw checked it out, says the building would be taller than the typical glide path of a landing jet at that distance, but it would be located 2 miles away from the glide path. So how can a plane land on a 150-foot wide runway but can't avoid a building 2 miles outside the final approach? I think this is laziness on part of the FAA. Jets routinely use airports with much tighter approaches than this. That said, they could be doing the developers a favor if they end up having to cut the height of the building down. It won't be an easy task keeping a building that tall fully occupied in Oklahoma City. I mean, really, that goes back to the first time we covered this story when it said, okay, that's one big building. What are you going to put in it?
Why?
Yeah. I mean, because remember, it was like a mix of retail, a hotel in there, and then people that would actually live in it. And even with all three of those things in there, we're still just like, well, what are you going to put in the rest of it? Mm-hmm. So obviously very contentious, as any sort of record-breaking building or anything is going to be. There are going to be people strongly opposed or strongly in support of it. And it's kind of intriguing to see where this might actually go. One other comment from Beast Boy with an I, which means it's intentional. Beast Boy says, this is most likely due to the FAA HQ being in Oklahoma City, and they are being jerks about it. I don't know. So a lot of heated opinions about it, and a
lot of conspiracy theories about the FAA.
I mean,
I guess I was not privy to that they were such a target of that.
You can do it for anything you want.
Yeah,
now.
I feel like
anything you want, Jeff.
Yeah.
I feel like we are just at the flashpoint of distrust in government agencies for our generation. All right, before we jump into, in case you missed it, the story is maybe not as popular on our websites, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. We have another word from our sponsor, Stay Sharp with Razor Leaf.
Digital transformation is reshaping manufacturing, and leaders must keep up with a rapidly changing technology landscape. Razorleaf, a global consulting and systems integration firm, launched Stay Sharp with Razorleaf, a podcast covering digital thread, digital twins, PLM, MES, data integration, and more. Whether you're a seasoned professional or new to digital transformation, this podcast will help you stay ahead of the trends. You can find Stay Sharp with Razorleaf on all major podcast platforms. Tune in today.
Okay. And we're back. This week's episode is brought to you by fellow podcaster Stay Sharp with Razorleaf, the ultimate podcast for all things digital in the manufacturing industry. Each episode takes a deep dive into the multifaceted world of digital transformation, exploring topics such as the digital thread, digital twins, IDEs, model-based strategies, and delving into the frontiers of cutting-edge technologies like PLM, MES, integration, and more. All right, in case you missed it, stories maybe not as popular on our sites, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Anna, let's start with you this week. What is your in case you missed it?
I picked a real bummer for you guys this week.
Yeah, I mean, actually, both of your picks.
Heading into the holidays, let's have a fun, lighthearted story.
Yep.
I will say that, like, in case you missed it, I was the third pick, and I definitely saw both your stories and changed my pick. Because I was like, you know what? We'll bring it up a little bit. Anyway.
Every time layoffs are announced, an angel gets his wings.
Oh, no.
Oh, just kidding.
No, that fits. Anna is against jobs, remember?
Oh, that's right. Bringing it back all the way back.
Guys, we need
enough
more,
jobs already.
We need more workers. That's the thing.
Is that going to get me another Hard Mike's cranberry lemonade in my stocking this year?
Cannot wait. I will buy you a drink this weekend, Jeff. Get ready for it. All right. My in case you missed it is about Butterball. And they announced that they are closing a plant in Arkansas. So less than a week after Thanksgiving, Butterball pulled its employees in for a town hall meeting in Jonesboro. And it wasn't to celebrate. It was to announce that they would be closing the facility after 2 decades and laying off 180 workers. So the CEO, Jay Gendrain, said that the company leadership deliberated for a long time about this decision. He called it difficult, but a lot of workers said that they saw it coming. They were seeing their shifts get cut down by a day. And if you look at the data behind it, Butterball has been facing some sales challenges. Among them, lower prices for poultry. To that end, Butterball reported $6 million in net income in the third quarter, which represented a 70% decline year over year. So hard to absorb, of course. Yeah. It felt really brutal to me because of the timing of it, I think. You can see why that they're having to make some changes here, and that revenue dive is pretty catastrophic.
Yeah.
But we just talked about falling food prices in multiple categories on a previous podcast and how impactful that was, even for a company like Cargill, who's the market leader, and they're cutting thousands of jobs. Yeah. So this, I think, sort of speaks to that environment for food companies and agribusiness. They're really dealing with a lot of stuff. And if you look at Butterball specifically, their recent history, they announced millions of dollars in investments in 2 Arkansas plants in 2021, plus hundreds of jobs that they added. Neither of those 2 plants was this one in Jonesboro. My point is the pandemic, as we saw with many other companies and many other industries, provided, I think, a bit of a false indicator of demand, a demand boost that ended up not being sustainable. People were home, they were cooking more. The industry hadn't gone through the price hike to pullback cycle that came with inflation. That's now impacting sales for many brands. It was a better time for food companies, I think, albeit temporarily so. And so we've seen another food company kind of fall victim to that post-pandemic business condition, that big drop in sales and profits. And you wonder if we're going to continue to see more of this in 2025. We've seen a couple of food plants shut down in Q4. Mm-hmm. Ones where you're like, okay, French fries, why? You know, like stuff.
Very brutal.
Yeah, some big job cuts, and so hopefully things will stabilize a little bit. But I thought it was an important story to highlight simply because, Butterball is a big brand name and everybody just got done having Thanksgiving dinner and probably had one of those turkeys in their fridge. And still, that's not enough to keep a company like that afloat when you're dealing with some of these market conditions. So
no, and for me, what jumped out is, are we going to see this with like Jennie-O and Hormel brand? Will we see this from other turkey producers? To me, when I saw this story, it was not surprising at all, because leading into the holiday season, they were giving away turkeys. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I know that I've told you both separately. I don't know if I mentioned it on the podcast because my worlds just merge and I don't know what happened where. But, I bought a bonus turkey this year because it was 49 cents a pound. And I made it the week after Thanksgiving and seriously had that in leftovers for the next week. And it was glorious. I would have purchased more if I had another chest freezer, which might be time to justify. That second chest freezer. But I don't know. So for me, this was not surprising at all, because to me, when I looked at those sales, that didn't just sound like, oh, okay, we're trying to move a few of these before the holiday. It seemed more like trouble to me.
Like prices are down.
Yeah, prices are down. Jeff, when you looked at this story, what were some of your takeaways? I mean, we have seen, particularly with the Thanksgiving holiday, cultural shift away from turkeys, not for us, but, other people. Sure. And, that having an impact both on the holiday season and just sales in general.
I think there's 2 trends here. I think the first one is the premium food brands. That's where we're seeing a lot of these layoffs and a lot of this consolidation. That 49 cent a pound turkey that you bought, that wasn't a Butterball, I'm going to assume.
It was Jennie-O.
Okay, but not Butterball. Yeah. Butterball is a premium brand. Yeah. I mean, when I bought mine at Costco, I would think it was 99 cents a pound. Okay. Yeah. So that's a Costco. That was a Butterball turkey, but it was the most expensive one there. Yeah. And same thing if you went to a grocery store to buy a Butterball, it's probably $1 more a pound than what you paid. Yeah. So I think that is an impact that consumers, and we've talked about this before, the store brands, the generics are becoming more prominent as people look at a turkey and go, what's the difference between a Butterball and the off brand? Yeah. You can argue that however you want to, but when you're looking to be a little bit smarter with your money, that's going to have an impact. So I think that's what we're seeing on food brands across the board, people making those decisions. I think the other thing is giving it back to a lot of what Anna was talking about in terms of sort of things coming back to where they probably would have been without the pandemic. I think we're seeing that as well. Consolidation in the food marketplace has been going on for the last 25, 30 years pretty strongly because there's a lot of money in food service. So people are seeing the benefits in terms of consolidating facilities and not having separate ones. You'd be surprised the name brand food products that are made right next to the generics. It's the same facility, just a little bit different recipe and a different package. So a lot of that is going to continue. And I think we're seeing, I wouldn't call it a righting of the ship. I don't want to be that cold, but the market is stabilizing in effect that brings about some very unpalatable dynamics to it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think we will see a little bit more of this before we're all the way there.
I mean, Jennie-O is number 2 to Butterball.
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying
Yeah.
if it's Butterball or if it's Coke or whomever, those premium brands are going to feel it.
No, I definitely agree with you. Do you see the trend reversing at all? Like, I mean, or is this just a real perfect storm against the Butterballs, Cargills, and other, where it might get worse before it gets better?
I don't think it's going to get worse. I just think before, when we weren't going out anywhere, you didn't care. I wasn't looking as closely at the grocery bill.
Yeah.
I'm in a weird spot here because my grocery bill's gone down because I don't have 3 kids to feed anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's different that way. So I don't look at stuff as closely, but I think everybody's going back to a point where they're like, why spend the extra $1 per pound, which in my case would have been like $20 on a different bird when I can get this one.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of the normalization of it.
No, that makes sense. I mean, Anna, do you see it getting worse before it gets better?
I don't know. I mean, if inflation is stabilizing here a little bit, which, some people think it is and some people think it's, we don't know. Then, potentially things will get back to normal a little bit. But I do think that there was some, a couple things. There was definitely some fictional changes in like what companies were investing for that just didn't stick around, those market conditions. Okay. And I think Jeff's right too about the private label stuff. I do think there's a little bit more awareness too on the consumer side these days about private label products being just as good. You've got Costco and Aldi and Trader Joe's, those companies where they have their private label products and people are like, these are fine, and you get used to that.
No, in almost any other product, I understand that. With turkeys, I guess I didn't know that there was as many private label options. I didn't realize that. Jeff, what's your in case you missed it this week?
Yeah, I don't think mine is a huge downer. Just sort of a situational, element here of manufacturing. I don't know.
Okay, what's your situational in case you missed it this week?
So I picked an article talking about Trump saying ports shouldn't install more automated systems. So President-elect Donald Trump voiced his support for the dock workers union before their contract expires next month. He met with Harold Daggett, who you remember is the president of the International Longshoremen's Association. He is the one before the last strike that was only 3 days, fortunately, who said, "We will cripple you." that was his guy. That was that guy. So that's who President Trump is going with and making some of his determinations here. President-elect Trump also said, "I've studied automation and know just about everything there is to know about it."
No doubt in my mind.
The amount of money saved is nowhere near the distress, hurt, and harm it causes for American workers, or in this case, our longshoremen. Foreign companies have made a fortune in the U.S. by giving them access to our markets. They shouldn't be looking for every last penny, knowing how many families are going to get hurt. Now, in contrast to that, the Maritime Alliance, who is the group of folks who own and operate all these ports, said the contract goes beyond ports to supporting American consumers and giving American businesses access to a global marketplace. Farmers, manufacturers, small businesses, and startups are looking for new markets to sell their products and ship them out of as well. It's not just about everything coming in. It's also about some of the stuff going out. Mm-hmm. So really what this comes down to is a political dynamic where President-elect Trump has said, hey, I'm going to back these guys. Let's not invest in the automation to make things quicker here because it's going to cut jobs at all these ports. Mm-hmm. Now, that might be the case, but if you can operate more efficiently and more effectively at a port, that should also draw in more business.
Yeah.
That shouldn't necessarily result in a direct loss in jobs. We've seen this in manufacturing for a long time. Will it eliminate some redundancies? Yes. Should it be feared and should it be championed by the individual who is supposed to be a champion of manufacturing and growth in the U.S.? I'll leave you to your own determination. I would say no. Yeah. But it also brings up a couple of other bigger issues here. First of all, these folks, the Longshoremen's Union, January 15th is their deadline. If they don't get some things in place that they want in terms of wage increases and some of these other assurances for jobs into the future, they're going back on strike. Those 3 days they were on strike was brutal. Okay. It impacted our economy greatly. So you mix that in with the fact that the president-elect has also talked about all these tariffs that he wants to institute coming from Canada and from Mexico even, not just China. We could have a real interesting January from a supply chain perspective if all of this hits in about the same time. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. It's also interesting to look at this from a business dynamic in terms of how are manufacturers going to be impacted? Are they going to actually see some of the benefits from those tariffs, but then be stuck because these ports are shut down? Yeah. They can't get product in and out the door. That's what's going to, again, it's one of those situations. It feels like the cat's chasing its tail a little bit here in terms of what to do. You want to support this union, and they probably do deserve some of the wage increases they're asking for. But when you go to this point, and you're saying, we're not going to allow this business to operate as efficiently as it can by automating and updating equipment, and you've got the president supporting that statement, I think this leads to short-term championships, long-term disaster. Yeah. Okay. There's going to be a bill that comes due here that nobody's going to be able to pay.
Yeah. I feel like you can look at the story and not look at it politically and look at it generationally and look at the ages of the people that are dispelling automation and kind of make your own determination from that. Just like,
well, and it's one thing for President-elect Trump to come out and basically say, I've studied this and I don't see the cost benefit analysis. Yeah. That's one thing. The longshoremen are basically saying it's going to cut our jobs. We're going to lose our jobs if these folks start investing in technology. That's a horrible look. And again, it's also coming from the guy who said, I'm going to cripple you. Yeah. So they're not gaining a lot of fans here.
Well, and it's also when you look at manufacturing, we're already so beyond that argument that we're already on to the next big thing, which is AI. And they're comparing AI to automation and how it will impact jobs differently. Jobs won't go away. Sure. They're just going to change. Mm-hmm. Anna, any surprises regarding the bluster with this one? And your thoughts on it? I mean, at a base level, when it comes to tasks that can be automated, it's just it comes down to simple efficiency and cutting costs.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I think you're totally right. I think he just is doing whatever he can. President-elect Trump, that is, doing whatever he can to avoid a strike. I think he's trying to keep them from striking because everyone went nuts. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was like a pressure cooker as soon as that started. The fact that they could, the economic prospects of being on strike for any longer than, a week or two or whatever, how, the downtime of that. I mean, it's really sort of harrowing from an economic perspective, and it could really snarl some of that agenda the first 100 days or whatever that you don't want to be dealing with that. Yeah. Do I think it sends a bad message? Yes. To say that automation is not helpful or that it's going to cut jobs and not, provide enough benefit for the cost. I mean, again, to your point, in manufacturing, there was a time when everyone was afraid of it, and we are so far past that.
That it's the example.
Yeah. I mean, it's like people get it. They're like, well, that's...
remember, all the automation that's been added to manufacturing, we still have 500,000 unfilled jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another quote from President-elect Trump, machinery which is expensive and which will constantly have to be replaced.
Yeah, and you need people to do that.
Yeah. Well, and it's also maybe some additional... maybe a refresher on modern automation.
Well, and we can also look at safety elements and all of that too. Yeah. So,
yeah.
Is the correct term president or president-elect?
I think you can use either because
he is a former
president.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's still, you still say President Obama and you still say President Biden, even though everyone's acting like he's gone. All right. So for mine, in case you missed it this week, I did something that we've never done before. So I didn't tell you guys. So I guess we'll see how it happens. But so basically, for mine, in case you missed it, I chose a story that I'm currently working on to publish just before the holidays. And it was so incredibly uplifting to me that I wanted to do it for the podcast before Christmas rather than, come to it in the podcast after Christmas, because, after the holiday happens and everyone gets back to work, they're so over Christmas. They're just like, I did it. It was fine. We all got the sweats. It's done. So I wanted to do it beforehand. The story that I picked, and you will soon be able to see on our websites, is engineers rally to make custom toys just before Christmas. For parents of kids with disabilities, finding adapted toys their children can play with is often difficult and expensive. These are commercially available toys rewired and connected to a larger button or switch for children with limited motor skills. But a talking Bluey that retails for $15 is rewired and sold for $70. A $10 bubble machine frog is resold for more than $50. Natalie Lyons-Donaway, principal manufacturing quality engineer at GE Appliances, a hair company. Always, every time. Hair company. Natalie was approached by her daughter. She's a speech-language pathologist who is interested in adapting toys. While Natalie didn't know anything about switch-adaptable toys, she was part of an engineering team at GE Appliances that specialized in taking things apart, making modifications, and putting them back together. So, a team of engineers turned an air conditioning lab at GE Appliances Park in Louisville, Kentucky, into a workshop. The company called them the, quote, GE Appliances Elf-gineers. Just cue the Andy Zoll sigh from the gallery. But these Elf-gineers built an assembly line where 26 employees dedicated about 90 hours to adapt 125 toys for children with disabilities. These Elf-gineers had a quality check where they made sure each toy worked. Then the toy was sent to an electronics engineer to test the control board and hook up the adapter. Finally, it was sent back to the workshop for final assembly. The toys were then sent to area nonprofits and schools, lit up the lives of children and families this holiday season. I think it goes without question why I chose this story. I found it incredibly uplifting. And I also thought it served as a good reminder of the skills that are possessed by the professionals in this industry and how they have the ability to make a real impact in their communities, local communities or larger communities throughout the US. And I mean, if only you could use this holiday season to get the feels a little bit, that's good. But if it could also motivate you a little bit to get out in your community, whether or not it's helping a STEM team, whether or not it's looking for projects like this, because sometimes you don't understand that these communities or these products even exist. I had no idea about these switch adaptable toys. I was unfamiliar. And once I read it, it made so much sense and I was surprised. And then I was actually a little bit angry that they're gouged, that there's a 7x increase on some of these products because there's so little demand for them. So I understand that both of you, likely this is your first exposure to the story. But Anna, your thoughts on the Elf-gineers at GE Appliances?
Yeah, very cool. I think you're right about the skills component of it, because I know there's a lot of companies that are very philanthropic and charitable around the holidays, especially, and they donate funds to, and obviously people do that as well. But to come up with a way to leverage this skill set that's actually very unique and not a lot of people can do for this very, very niche thing, but does so much good. Like, how much better is that than just writing a check? I don't know. It's such a cool idea to do that. And then also you have a really nice story to kind of show off like your chops in engineering and what you're doing. It's just, I think it's a great win-win and a really cool idea.
No, and I like to think of that aha moment where they're thinking about what these toys are and how they're made, and just like, well, that's what we do every day.
Yeah,
like
we could do this.
We could do that actually, probably way easier than whatever DIYer is doing it on at home. So there was a couple of, I want to try and find the specific quote, but there was one engineer in particular where he was talking about his team of engineers, and he's like, well, I know the electronics engineers can do it, and I'm fairly confident the mechanical engineers can make it work. And it was just like, oh, I like it. Yeah. Throw a little shade. But Jeff, your thoughts on the story?
No, it sounds like a real life Santa's workshop here, you know, especially with the assembly line hooked up and finding the space. And kudos to GE for allowing their people or giving them the bandwidth to do this type of stuff too. No, extremely impressive. These stories are always awesome. So,
well, and so another part of the story that was kind of cool is to get these toys, they were donated. So friends, family, and coworkers donated the 125 toys that they were able to elf-gineer. And I don't know, it's I always appreciate these stories, not just around the season, but anytime. And I was very thankful that Whitney sent this my way. So
Absolutely.
Please keep them coming. We'd love to cover them. All right. Well, before we get out of here this week, let's jump into our final thoughts. Anna, what's your final thought this week?
Not much for me. Just excited to wrap up the year and have some downtime with my family. And I hope that all of our subscribers and listeners and viewers get to do the same. So happy New Year, everyone. And we'll see you next year.
Right. We'll see.
I can't believe it's 2025. Somebody the other day said the fact that it is now 5 years past 2020 does not compute, and it does not for me either.
No, time is completely different now.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what happened
with small kids. My final thought this week is that so we changed when we were going to do the podcast this week from Thursday to Wednesday, and like Wednesday is the only day that I really have an obligation to go home early and get my kid off the bus. And I just took for granted.
You just left him there?
He's sitting there. So we should probably wrap this up. No, but this morning I informed my wife that, hey, oopsie daisy, I sent out an invite to the entire podcast team except my extending podcast team at home. And I just have to say, I'm very appreciative for her and everything that she does. Not just in tolerating the person I am, but also just really making my work-life balance really work well. And I'm very appreciative for her, very thankful for her this holiday season. And thank you. Sorry. Because this is like the one day that she has a work obligation where she, she trades 4 days for one. And I bailed on my one this time. And so I'm just sorry.
Just blame it on Eric. It's Eric's fault.
Though. I mean, she knows me.
Yeah.
Like if I was just actually, the message I sent to her after I got to work, I was just like, hey, just so you know, blame Jeff, Anna, Eric, and Alex and not me. She's like, I know who to blame. I was like, oh, no.
In all caps.
Yeah.
But, I'll make a steak or something for dinner.
Carrie can't stay mad at us.
No.
She has a big steak.
The biggest heart. Yeah, I know.
Yes, right? She does.
Yeah. So thank you, and I love you, honey. Merry Christmas. Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
I'll also spotlight my wife. She worked with a local business to basically, get one of those lists of everybody who frequents the business as a patron to donate folks to the DAIS. DAIS, which is Domestic Abuse Center here in Madison. And when we walked into the place to put our stuff in there that we had gotten, it was just a mountain, just a pile of stuff. And this is something that business had never done before. So to initially start out, one of the owners of it's a chiropractor office. It's like they don't know what they're walking into here. Like they're probably expecting this small business to show up with like a trunk full of stuff, and there was probably 6 or 7 trunkfuls of stuff,
wow.
Games and personal hygiene items and all that. Point of all that is, first of all, call it my wonderful wife, but also these places need this stuff all year round. Mm-hmm. It's not just around the holidays. I know sometimes it's a pain to grab that checklist and pick up a couple of extra things, but once you get into it, it feels amazing. It's really fun to do. And we spent probably twice as much as we were going to initially. Just, look into those places, not just now, but all the time, because they can always use it. And it's a pretty fun thing to be involved with.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. I mean, I always talk about how selfish it is because it makes you feel so good, but it's like you're having a real impact on the lives of multiple families.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's a good reminder that we're a community.
Absolutely. Also fun, we had some trivia stuff.
It's so wrong. I'm sorry. I want to throw it out there.
The stuff going back to 2 weeks ago when Nolan was here, nobody's gotten these right. The thing with the hors d'oeuvres, actually what they called it on the card was don't choke on the toothpicks.
Oh.
So you did say choking, people, but you didn't mention the toothpicks, so I can't give it to you. The other thing, despite what Anna said about grease fires, you don't cover them and then go running from the room.
Yeah.
That was not a correct answer.
You forgot Scream. Was that on the card? Or?
It was not.
Oh.
You cover it in baking soda.
Yeah.
Also to put out the grease fire.
And then run.
So we didn't get anything there.
Okay.
But with last week, we did have 2 winners. Mark got it right and did, excuse me. Oh, shoot. I had him up here.
While Jeff is pulling this up, I just want to say that I realized the error of my ways immediately after we stopped recording, and I know how ridiculous a 22-degree angle.
I forgot the question. What?
We'll get there, but Mark and Bill both got them right. So send me your addresses. We can get you out some T-shirts and koozies. David, Bill did call you out a little bit.
Oh, no! I knew
He said the angle that you projected there would basically be a boardwalk.
I know.
Not an angle for a ladder.
I was like a springboard.
He is still going to defer to your mathematical genius.
Okay.
And issues going forward.
Thank you.
He did at least give you that pat on the back.
That's good. I respect the appreciation, and I know. It just ate at me all week.
I did give some leniency on this one because when it came to storing an unused refrigerator, what did you say, Anna?
In a locked room, I think. Just, right? Isn't something like that?
Well, you're supposed to make sure the door is closed. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the readers came back with saying, no, you need to take the door off of it. I'm going to say that's basically the same thing. Yeah. I think that's actually a smarter move, so we'll definitely go with that. As far as the angle for the ladder, it's 1 foot away for every 4 foot of ladder. The equivalent of that, of course, David would know as a mathematical savant.
Yeah.
Is a 75-degree angle. I knew you know that
77.
already.
I was going to say 77, which I believe is more accurate.
Kudos to our listeners who got that one right.
And
we'll
kudos to us.
Stuff.
Yeah, and kudos to us for getting it just so far from accurate. I did have somebody around the holidays who listens to the podcast say that their preferred method of disposing of a refrigerator is that you take it out to a cornfield and you throw a stick of dynamite into it, and then you drop it on its head, and then you blow it into the sky.
I have seen a number of refrigerators at military ranges, like where we firing like machine guns and things like that, just to give a nice big target. Yeah. So there's another application.
Upcycling.
Not necessarily the safest, but
I didn't
another
think any
option.
of those.
Like very.
But good job, Bill and Mark.
Good job, Bill and Mark. And again, Bill, thank you for the continued support. All right. Well, do you have new questions this week?
Nothing new. We'll figure something out fun.
All right.
Coming up in 2025.
Very good. All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at in.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletters. Make sure you get delivered to your inbox first. And remember, subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us when we go live on January 6th, which will be our next episode being sent out on the 7th. So if you want to come see us live, Jan 6th. All right. For Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells, I'm David Banty. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast.